You keep telling yourself this connection is manageable, just part of the routine, just someone you happen to work beside. But lately, the way they look at you before walking away has been harder to shake. There's a quiet tension under the surface, and you already feel it. Let's take a closer look at what's really going on here. What stands out first is how controlled you've been. You answer professionally, keep conversations short, stay focused on what needs to get done. But then something small happens. They linger near your desk longer than necessary, or your name sounds different coming from them, and your attention slips for a second. I keep noticing the two gold circles and something crossing between them. It feels like two lives trying not to overlap, but already affecting each other anyway. And this is what starts to explain the whole pattern. You're not confused about the attraction. You're trying to control what it could change. I think you've already caught yourself rereading one of their messages before replying, then setting your phone down just to calm your thoughts. This connection isn't becoming intense because you imagined it. It's becoming harder to ignore because both of you are pretending it's smaller than it really is. You may have already felt this, but they are not as unaffected as they pretend to be. In fact, I think part of the tension comes from how carefully they try to hide it. They stay composed, keep things moving, act normal when other people are around, but then there's that moment when it's just the two of you and the entire atmosphere changes. I keep noticing a pause that doesn't release. A figure turned slightly away. They start to say something personal, then switch back to work at the last second. And the strange part is, you notice it every time now. You can feel when they pull themselves back. This is where it becomes clearer. Their hesitation is not coming from disinterest. It's coming from how strong this already feels to them. I think they've been trying to convince themselves this can stay simple, professional, controlled. But their behavior keeps breaking that story apart in small ways. They look for you without realizing it. They respond quickly, then disappear for hours after conversations that feel too real. And when the silence stretches, your chest tightens because part of you already knows they're emotionally overwhelmed, not detached. There's something here that keeps building under restraint, like air that feels too still. Neither of you has crossed the line yet, but both of you are starting to realize how close you already are to it. You keep trying to reduce this connection into something reasonable. It's just work. This would complicate everything. If they really felt something, they would say it clearly. But even while you tell yourself that, you still notice every change in their tone. And I'm starting to notice what this is really about. You've been waiting for consistency that hasn't fully arrived. Not because nothing is there, but because they keep coming close emotionally, then stepping back the moment honesty could change everything. A pause that lingers too long, light over still water. You read one of their messages and stare at the screen a second longer than usual because part of you realizes they avoided the deeper thing again. They checked in. They hinted. They stayed emotionally nearby, but they still did not fully say what you needed them to say. And once you notice this, it becomes harder to ignore. You've been softening the pattern to protect your hope, telling yourself they're busy, careful, uncertain, scared, and maybe they are. But your body already knows the difference between someone feeling something and someone truly showing up for it. That's the part settling in now. Not all at once, but quietly. You stop reaching for explanations as fast. You let the silence sit longer before trying to decode it. Because deep down, You're beginning to realize this connection is real, but so is the emotional hesitation surrounding it. There's something about this connection that neither of you has been able to put back where it started. Even after the conversations end, even after the workday moves on, it keeps finding its way back into your mind in quiet moments. And I don't think that's accidental. They may never say it directly right now, but they already see you as someone emotionally significant, not temporary, not casual. There's a quiet weight that stays around the way they interact with you, especially when they think you are not fully noticing. A pause beneath the surface, something not fully moving. You check your phone, see their name, and your body reacts before your thoughts do. Not dramatically, just enough to tell you this matters more than you've been admitting. And even when you try to pull your focus elsewhere, one small interaction with them changes the emotional tone of your entire day. This is why it hasn't gone away, because the connection is no longer living only in possibility. It's already affecting how both of you move around each other. The careful wording, the hesitation before replying, the moments where one of you almost opens up, then retreats again. And once you see how often this repeats, it becomes harder to dismiss as attraction alone. Something deeper has already rooted itself here, quietly, steadily, and it still hasn't released either of you. There's a part of this that starts to feel different now, not because the connection disappeared. If anything, it feels more present. But the urgency around it is slowly loosening, and that changes the way you move through it. You might notice something changing in how you respond. You read their message once, then put your phone down instead of analyzing every word for hidden meaning. And the strange thing is, the silence afterward doesn't hit your body the same way. Your shoulders drop a little. Your mind stops racing as quickly, a quieter space inside, movement that doesn't rush. I think you're beginning to accept that you cannot force clarity from someone who is still trying to control what they feel. And once that settles in, you stop exhausting yourself trying to predict every shift in their behavior. That doesn't mean you care less. It just means you're no longer abandoning your own peace every time this connection becomes emotionally uncertain. You let a pause exist without immediately filling it. You stop rewriting conversations in your head late at night. Little by little, your energy comes back to you. And this is where it starts to change how you move. Because the connection still pulls at you, quietly, consistently. But now, instead of gripping it tightly, you're starting to stand still long enough to see what it actually does next. There's a quieter part of this connection surfacing now. Not the tension between you two, your own emotional truth underneath it, the part you've been trying to stay composed around. And this is where you start to notice something. You wait for their tone to tell you how safe you are before fully relaxing into the conversation. If they seem warm, you soften. If they pull back slightly, your mind starts filling in the blanks before they've even explained anything. A reflection caught briefly. Patterns looping back. It's subtle, but it keeps showing up in the way you try to stay calm while quietly spiraling underneath. You reread a message to check whether they sounded distant. You almost ask what changed. Then make the question smaller because part of you is afraid of sounding too affected, and it makes sense why this shows up. You've been trying to protect your heart from wanting more than the situation can safely promise right now. Not because your feelings are wrong, but because uncertainty makes you reach for emotional control wherever you can find it. But here's the part that begins to loosen something. You're starting to notice the urge before immediately reacting to it. You pause before over-explaining. You let silence exist for an extra moment instead of rushing to repair it. And once you notice yourself doing that, the whole pattern begins to feel less automatic, less in control of you. There's something about this connection that keeps returning you to the same emotional space, even when you try to move forward logically. Not because nothing is happening, but because the pattern underneath it keeps unfolding in familiar ways. And this is where you start to notice something repeating. They come back with a small message, a check-in, a look that lingers too long, but when the conversation gets close to honesty, they pull themselves back again. Not completely, just enough to keep the deeper truth hanging there unfinished. A loop that keeps returning, ending up in the same space. You feel steady for a while. Then one silence changes your mood more than you want it to. You reread the conversation, trying to find certainty in a sentence that almost said what you needed but never fully did. And this is why it keeps coming back. Because the connection gives enough emotional closeness to reopen hope, but not enough consistency to let you fully relax into it. It keeps you emotionally available without ever feeling completely secure, and after a while, you start shaping your reactions around their uncertainty without even realizing it. Not all at once, but quietly. You respond gently instead of honestly. You wait longer than you meant to. You tell yourself to stop expecting clarity, then feel your attention pull toward them again anyway. And something about that repeated pull is becoming harder to ignore now, because it's leading somewhere deeper than attraction alone. And this is where it starts to make more sense. Not in a perfect, clean way, more like something inside you finally stops fighting what it already knew. Because when you look back at this connection now, you can see the pattern more clearly than before. You reread the conversation and notice what was never directly answered. They responded, but they avoided the part that actually mattered, and suddenly the confusion doesn't feel random anymore. A wider view forming, things slowly coming together. Before, you kept questioning yourself, wondering if you were overthinking, expecting too much, reacting too emotionally. But now you're starting to realize the unsettled feeling came from inconsistency, not from your intuition being wrong. And this is why it never fully made sense before. You were trying to create emotional clarity inside a situation where someone else was still avoiding it themselves. Part of them cares deeply. You already felt that, but another part of them is afraid of what changes once this becomes fully real, and your body understood that long before your mind wanted to admit it. You notice that your peace changes depending on how steady they are with you. One day feels grounded, the next leaves you questioning everything again, and once that connects, the whole situation starts to look different, not hopeless, not meaningless, just honest in a way it hadn't been before, and that honesty is quietly preparing you for whatever comes next. Something about this connection is no longer sitting on your chest the way it used to, not because the feelings disappeared, they didn't. But you're beginning to realize you cannot carry the entire emotional weight of this by yourself anymore. And this is where it starts to loosen. You read their message, feel the urge to send another paragraph explaining yourself more clearly, and then you don't. You let the conversation stay where it is for the night. And strangely, that silence doesn't swallow you the same way anymore. A weight not sitting the same, hands slowly opening. Before, you kept trying to hold the connection together through understanding, patience, careful wording. You thought if you stayed calm enough, perceptive enough, emotionally available enough, clarity would finally arrive. But now you're starting to see that their uncertainty was never yours to solve. And once you stop carrying it the same way, the whole feeling starts to change. Not dramatically, quietly. You stop checking whether they are online. You go back to your day instead of waiting for the next sign. And in that small release, something unexpected opens, space to hear your own intuition again without panic speaking over it. The connection is still there. You still feel it when they reach toward you emotionally. But now there's room around the feeling, and that space is beginning to change what becomes possible next. You're not in the same emotional place you were when this reading began. The connection still matters. You still feel it, but something in you is no longer collapsing around the uncertainty the same way. You read the message once, feel the familiar urge to search for hidden meaning, and then your attention slowly returns to your own life instead of staying trapped there. And that moment matters more than you realize. A quiet space opening, something beneath the surface. Because the truth is, this person was never meant to enter your life in a simple way. They came into your routine quietly, naturally, almost accidentally, but the emotional impact was never small. This connection was meant to show you something about how deeply you can feel without abandoning yourself in the process. And this is what feels different now. You're beginning to trust what your reactions were trying to tell you all along. Not every silence needs to be explained away. Not every mixed signal needs to become hope. A pattern is still a message, even when nobody fully says the words out loud. But this still doesn't feel finished. There's another layer underneath all of this. Something about why this connection arrived the way it did, and why it continues to stay emotionally present even now. So let's see what the Oracle wants to reveal about what's still unfolding beneath this. You might have noticed this already, but the connection is no longer pulling you into the same emotional panic it used to. You read the message once, feel the urge to figure out what they really meant, and instead of spiraling into it, you put your phone down and return to your own space for a while. It doesn't feel loud, but it's there, a softer space opening. And the reason this matters is because you're no longer reacting from the same fear of losing them. Part of you is starting to understand that caring about someone deeply does not mean you have to carry every unanswered feeling they leave behind. There's still emotion here, still attachment, still moments where one small shift in their tone catches your attention more than you want it to. But you're beginning to notice how exhausted you became trying to hold certainty together from fragments. And this is where it becomes more noticeable. The silence does not control your body the same way anymore. You may not have called it this yet, but something in you has started protecting your peace quietly, without needing permission from them first. There's still something underneath this connection that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. But now you're steady enough to actually see it when it does. There's something familiar about this. The same silence appears again, the same pause in communication, the same moment where part of you wants to reach for reassurance before it's actually been offered. Only this time, you notice yourself stopping in the middle of the reaction. You read the message, feel the urge to send another one just to steady the connection, and instead you let the moment breathe for a while, like holding your distance, not to punish them, not to play games. Just because your body is starting to understand how exhausting it became to carry every uncertain moment alone. You might notice the pattern now. They still affect you, maybe more than you admit sometimes, but you're beginning to observe their consistency instead of immediately turning potential into certainty. And this is why the repetition feels different now. Before, the silence would pull you into overthinking almost instantly. Now, even when the discomfort shows up, you stay with yourself a little longer before abandoning your own peace to fix what they have not clarified. There's a slightly uncomfortable truth in that realization too. Part of you has known for a while that their hesitation says just as much as their attention does. And the more this pattern repeats, the harder it becomes to pretend you don't see what it's been showing you all along. There's a moment where it just clicks when you realize the silence is no longer affecting you in the exact same way, not because you stopped caring, but because something inside you finally stopped treating urgency like safety. You let the conversation sit for a few hours, notice the old impulse to reach out again for reassurance, and for the first time, you do not follow it automatically, like something falling into place, and this is why it felt different. You were never actually trying to control them, you were trying to calm the fear that came from carrying the emotional weight of the connection mostly by yourself. You may not have called it this before, but part of your distance lately has not been coldness at all. It has been awareness. Awareness of how much energy you spent trying to make uncertainty feel stable. Awareness of how quickly you abandoned your own peace whenever their attention became inconsistent. This is the part that changes everything, because now when you observe instead of reacting, you finally see the pattern clearly enough to stop blaming yourself for feeling unsettled by it. And once you see that, you cannot really unsee it. The connection still matters deeply, but now your own emotional steadiness matters too, and that changes the entire shape of what happens next. You don't react the same way anymore, and the strange part is, you may not have even noticed when it started happening. They say something vague or disappear into silence for a while, and instead of immediately trying to figure out what changed, you let the moment sit on its own for a bit, like releasing your grip quietly. You read the message without spiraling into every possible meaning behind it, and for a second, you actually feel the difference in your body. Your chest does not tighten the same way. Your mind does not rush to fix the uncertainty before it has even fully arrived. This is the part you can actually feel. Not as a dramatic breakthrough, just a quieter response that keeps showing up more often now. There's a difference in how you respond because you are no longer giving urgency the same power over your emotional state. You're beginning to understand that not every pause needs your immediate emotional labor to hold the connection together, and that realization changes small things first. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing the emotional tone of the conversation. You observe more, react less. Not because the feelings disappeared, but because something inside you finally realize that your peace cannot keep depending on someone else's consistency. You can feel the difference now without needing to convince yourself of it. The connection still exists. The care is still there. But it no longer takes you away from yourself every time something feels uncertain. You read the message without losing yourself in it, and that alone tells you how much has quietly changed. Like still water clearing, there used to be a moment where silence immediately became fear, where distance felt like something you had to solve before you could relax again. Now the pause happens, and you stay with yourself a little longer first. You still care, you just don't disappear into it anymore. That's the part that finally became real. Not because you forced yourself to move on. Not because the feelings vanished overnight. You simply stopped carrying the entire emotional weight of the connection by yourself. And once that happened, something softer settled underneath everything else. The old pull still appears sometimes. You notice it, you feel it, but it no longer leads you the same way. Nothing about this was random, even the parts that confused you. This connection changed something in how you listen to yourself now. And you can feel that quietly, clearly, without needing anyone else to explain it for you. Thank you for being here and sharing your energy with this reading. As always, take only what truly resonates with your situation and leave the rest behind. Not every message will fit every person, and that's completely okay. I hope this gave you a little clarity, comfort, or simply helped you feel more connected to yourself in some way. If this reading felt meaningful to you, you're always welcome to come back for the next one. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next reading.